Thank you all for coming today. Welcome to The Pillars. We are a community led space aimed at supporting projects and educating our investors through intelligent, meaningful conversation. Here we ask the tough questions you all want answered. Now, let me introduce to you a special hybrid form of this space. We have not just a project founder, but we have a project founder influencer hybrid here. And this is not today, especially at least. It's not about him. That this is going to be a conversation for tomorrow. Today we will be talking about Wolf of Finance, and that is our CE, the first CE of our Wolfo Takeover Week. So we will start today with Wolf of Finance. Tomorrow we will have a Crypto After Dark with Mr. Drew Wolfer, where we will be having a deeper dive in to what he's about and a more candid conversation about him, more podcast style. And then next week, we will be talking also about PreSend. Why we have these conversations is because especially Wolf of Finance and PreSend now last Friday, it is now, I mean, at least for me, it was a Friday, May 24th, they started for Wolf of Finance and for PreSend the crowdfund. So Mr. Wolfer is doing the rounds, talking about the crowdfund, presenting what Wolf of Finance and PreSend is all about. To give you guys, the audience, a little introduction, for the people who don't know what Wolf of Finance is, basically, Wolf of Finance is aiming to be a Web3 cryptocurrency conglomerate. As of now, the main asset and the main revenue driver for Wolf of Finance are the different kind of nodes that they have. You have Ethereum, AVAX, Flux, and Phantom. You have nodes, validator nodes, and master nodes on all these chains. What that basically means, it's in a way, if you think about it, like a miner, like a Bitcoin miner, but on those proof of stake networks, which are basically providing the infrastructure for the blockchain. So this is a revenue model as if you would mine, for example, Bitcoin or something. Yeah, and what is very special about that is that Mr. Wolfer has made, if I may say, very savvy decisions to jump in at the right time. All of these nodes and, of course, the underlying assets that support these nodes have increased tremendously in price. So good call on that, definitely. And the other interesting aspect of Wolf of Finance is PreSend, which is a proprietary security software that helps people to not screw up when they are sending funds. So it supports people. It's a software that's attaching to a wallet that helps people when they might have a wrong transaction or maybe a scammy transaction. It tests these transactions. And this software is also patent pending at the moment. And Wolf of Finance owns a piece of that as well. Yeah, and now Wolf of Finance has started their crowdfund via Akemona. It is linked in the community questions channel and for the YouTube viewers in the description. And this is, you get all the information there about the whole business, what they're aiming to do, which is, for example, big crypto mining potentially in the future, real estate, even oil production. So that's interesting stuff. I would advise you to all check it out, have a read through, and yeah, I think this was one of the more longer intros that I have done in my time of being the intro hype person. So I just want to also say we have a $50 giveaway that is going to happen at some stage during the CE. And also what we have as a special pillars deal as well is if you attend all three Wolfer CEEs, which is today the Wolfer Finance, the Crypto After Dark, and PreSend next week, you will get a juicy 500 PXP, which you know is going towards you becoming a beneficiary of the Pillars portfolio. And yeah, I think that's it for me. Please ask your questions in the community questions channel. It is open. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoys.
Thank you very much, David. Drew, welcome. We've already said our hellos, but thank you very much for joining us. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. I'm going to throw a random question at you first. I see and have read that you were on a soccer scholarship, and I used to play relatively high level soccer, or football as we call it here. So I am super curious as to what position you played.
Yeah, I was the guy that made it happen, man. Striker.
You were. Okay, so you're enjoying watching Lionel Messi in the MLS at the minute.
100%. Yep, 100%. But I'm gonna make everybody mad. I'm a Ronaldo fan. I'm a Ronaldo fan because the reason, and there's a reason for it, and I'll explain it just in like 30 seconds, really quick. Ronaldo wasn't meant to be where he's at. And he got there by sheer determination, hard work, and he wasn't like natural. Like you can argue he was naturally gifted, but was he naturally gifted like Messi? Like Messi his touch is magical. It's like he was born with a ball on his foot, whereas Ronaldo had to train his ass off to get where he was. So I respect that more than necessarily Messi. Messi went through a lot of stuff. Don't get me wrong, especially stuff with his dad, everything. But I just feel like Messi has a little bit more natural ability, and they're both playing at the same level. So you have to respect them both. I just identify a little bit better, I guess, with Ronaldo because I didn't have the natural ability, and I kind of brute forced my way into being able to do that, right? Just through hard work.
Right. Well, I like it, and I like that you appreciate the hard work. Hard work is something that is often lost on people, and it's something that you're putting in now. Hard work in terms of getting Wolf of Finance out there to people, moving away from what it was prior to what you're offering now, which is NFTs now into a digital security token, and trying to do things the right way. We've already kind of loosely discussed that you're not allowed to say certain things because the SEC demands you direct people to the right spot so they can do their own research. But there's going to be a high level overview, of course, that you can offer us in terms of what Wolf of Finance is in its current format. And then we'll slowly get into what it is that you're hoping to offer somewhere down the line potentially. So can you give us that high level overview at the minute?
Absolutely, man. So Wolfer Finance is a very simple concept for people to understand if they understand what a real estate company is and does, right? So I always kind of the easiest way that I can describe it, it is similar to a real estate company. I would just call it on-chain real estate. So think of the real estate. I'll give you an exact example. An Ethereum validator node. You have to required collateral, you have to lock up 32 Ethereum, which at this point is like $125,000. So it's quite expensive, a lot more expensive than when we bought them for like 36 grand in 2022. So that's pretty legendary, and I'm super grateful and humbled by that price appreciation of those assets. But you collateralize your 32 ETH. That's kind of like your down payment on your house, right? Then you host this node and its software and all of the blockchain data inside of your server, right? Your server is your house. That house houses your tenant, and your tenant is the blockchain. They're the one renting it out, right? And then the data that comes in that you validate all the transactions for is like your tenant and their family and furniture. And then the way that you're paid is through rent, similar, right? But it is called gas fees. And those are the fees everybody pays whenever they want to go swap to the next best meme coin that they think is going to 100x before it goes down by 99%. That's the fee that you have to pay on that blockchain in order to swap or move that around. So those fees go to the validators. And in the case of proof of work blockchains that aren't proof of stake, like Ethereum, Avalanche, and FTM, they go a lot of times half and half to the miners and the masternode holders, which is what our Flux masternodes are. They are masternodes. So yeah, that's kind of like a high level overview of what Wolfer Finance does, how it makes money, types of assets that we have under management, why we do what we do. And yeah.
Right. And what are these nodes? This is going to be the first question that people ask. I'm sure someone's just asked it, which is why I'm asking it. I'm sure you've just mentioned them again, but you said AVAX, you said Ethereum. What else was there?
Yeah, so we have 4 Ethereum validators that we bought for around $36,000 a piece back in 2022. We have an Avalanche validator that is actually it's pretty massive. I don't know the exact token size on it, but it's somewhere in the realm of like 16 to 18,000 Avalanche on that bad boy. And that's just what is in our validator that we have delegated and staked, right? We bought Avalanche at $15. We also have an FTM validator node that's absolutely massive as well. I think it's in the 800 to 900,000 FTM token range. And we bought that at 23 cents per FTM. And then we have 8 top tier Flux Stratus nodes that we bought the Flux for 45 cents back in 2022. So those are the 4 nodes that we have. Obviously, there's others that we want in the future. Nodes are quite expensive, so you can't get them all, right? It's not Pokemon. You can't catch them all unless you have billions of dollars. Yeah, we want to keep scaling that. And we have really advantageous prices right now. So even if we were to double down on our Ethereum position, our dollar cost average would be significantly lower than what the market price is. And let's be real, you're probably not going to, at least anytime soon, get the market prices that we paid back in 2022, if even ever again. And I don't know, but I mean, the market would have to crash out significantly. Like we would have to see like a 75 to 80% shed for you to be able to get Ethereum at $1,150 again.
Yeah, you guys did some very good business when it mattered. Certainly that portfolio has grown. But of course, part of this investment and part of the interest for people is going to be where it is that you plan to take Wolf of Finance, the offerings that you guys are talking about that are potentially in the pipeline. Some of those things are very interesting. I'm going to dial into each one as we go, but could you just give us a bit of an overview of where you're wanting to take this? So it's obviously access to these masternodes that, as you say, is going to be incredibly expensive for anybody to own one or run one at this stage, and unlikely that unless you've got a ton of money, you're ever going to get to that point with the ones that you've mentioned thus far. If you're not an extremely wealthy person. So what else are you offering that you're going to give people access to, your company is going to be trying to push forward and you guys are going to try and grow into?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I appreciate you kind of alley-ooping me for that. So we would like to take on the other side of blockchain infrastructure, because we kind of talked about the on-chain real estate company, the nodes part, but then there's like the railways, right? Which are the miners. And so we could also mine Bitcoin, Litecoin, Doge, Caspa, Flux, whatever proof of work mining that we wanted to do. Now, with a caveat, one thing that I will say is that I am not going to jump into anything or force anything just for the sake of doing it, just to say, oh, we're mining Bitcoin. I don't care about it that much to do that. I'm not going to risk my company. I'm not going to risk our profitability. The reason, because those are not appreciating assets. With the validators, it's not as hard for me to say, okay, we can add to the validators, because if you truly believe in those blockchains like Ethereum, I mean, let's be real, does anyone think Ethereum is going to not be here in 2 years, right? So, and most likely it's going to be higher, okay? So they have the ability to appreciate over time. Whereas with the miners, they do not. The underlying collateral, Bitcoin, that you mine has the ability to grow over time. But if you want to consistently play or pay out shareholder rewards, you're not going to sit there and hold that Bitcoin for 3 years until it 4x's, right? So you got to make sure that you get in at the right time and you buy the very best and the most brand new miners. And then you have to take into account the fact that new miners come out every single year that kill the hash rate of the previous miners. So you have to think ahead of that. That way you don't get into a hydro whale situation. And now you have all these old miners that can't keep up and the halving just happened. And now you're not profitable because your kilowatt hour, and this isn't a dig at them, I'm just using them as an example. Now your kilowatt hour is way too much. So you can't afford to actually be profitable. So through my network, inside of my family, we have a property that we'll talk about 2 times on this call, I'm sure. And it actually has oil wells on it. And a couple of the oil wells are capped. A couple of them are still going. And they've been established for 10 to 12 years. And they've been pumping out oil. Well, what comes off of oil is natural gas. They burn it off into the atmosphere. But not this property. This property caps that and then uses that natural gas as a power source almost for free, essentially, that powers a 50,000 square foot warehouse out on that property. And that property is actually within about a 10-minute drive of a pretty decent sized metropolitan area. It's not huge. It's like, 80, 100,000 people town, but it's not out in the middle of nowhere, but it's out far enough. So yeah, I mean, I think cryptocurrency mining is something that we would like to get into if it makes sense. Passes due diligence, we get the contracts for the low power cost and also funding, because you need like 500,000 to $1 million to do any real damage inside of cryptocurrency mining, because it's very expensive. And then your miners, essentially, they lose value by about 90% after about a year or two. So you got to really be profitable in order to be able to do that. So it's not something I would just jump into willy-nilly. We have to really think about that. Secondarily is real estate. We have real estate development deals. Those are there. They're tried and true. They're not going anywhere. We have real estate development deals for residential builds in Tennessee and in Florida in the United States. And both of those communities, you can do, single family home. It takes about 9 months to build, or you could do anything up to like a fourplex, right? And you can do one of two things: build that and then sell it to somebody for a markup because they don't want to wait 9 months to build their house. So they just buy it from you because you've already built it. Or two, you can own that house and then rent it out, similar to what we do with our master and validator nodes, for consistent income over time. And then you're in the same hopes that that house or those properties appreciate in value over time while they're still printing you consistent income, right? And then the third thing is the oil production. And I have 2 properties. And I can get a little bit further into it because I know, you kind of want a brief overview of this, but, we have 2 different properties that are adjacent to each other. They share a property line. One of them, I actually have a LOI, a letter of intent, that says if they're going to drill a well on that property, we will be the one drilling the well, pending obviously due diligence, contracts, and as well as funding. But secondarily, there's a second one, which is the one that I was talking about earlier, that has 4 oil wells on it. They just need to be re-drilled because they need to be moved essentially after about 10 to 15 years of oil wells pumping. Sometimes you have to move them, or you have to do this weird kind of chemical process because they will get bogged up with all this gunk that they've been, feeding through to filter the oil over those 10 to 15 years. And sometimes it makes more sense to just cap the wells and then just drill a new one for like anywhere from about $300,000 to $500,000, because to put all the chemicals in there, it's anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 anyways, and there's no guarantee that that actually worked. So sometimes it's just better to drill the new wells. So that's where we come in, right? And that's something that we're working on right now. And again, that is a family-owned property that has printed oil for probably in the realm of 10 to 15 years. So it's not just some random guy from Texas that's like, I have a property with oil. No, like we know it's there.
Right. I mean, that's a lot to absorb. And as you've already said, and I'm going to reiterate, go ahead, take a look at the Acamona site. There's a lot of information. Don't be overwhelmed by all of the tabs that you see on the left-hand side. It is just one page that you can scroll through if you want to. So it's not as long as it might first seem. There's a lot to absorb. There's a lot to take in. There's a lot that you guys want to achieve. So I think what we do is we dial back and just start talking about this relationship that you have with the family and the property. And you want to do things the right way, of course, when it comes to oil production. And let's start with the potential of oil production.
Yeah.
But if you don't have necessarily a base in oil production, or you don't have the kind of experience that is necessary to really get this off the ground, and I'm not for one second suggesting you wouldn't be able to, but where does Drew plan to turn, and who do you plan to turn to kind of bring in that experience, so that when you're talking about something like this, which is an SEC offering that you're doing, you're trying to attack this space in the right way? Everybody, I'm sure, sitting in here has seen some form of your content, and you're not backwards in coming forwards when you're looking at the space and taking on real bad actors or people that are just ill-equipped to deal with others' money. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow. But when you look at this, you must realize, okay, I'm not necessarily going to have the bandwidth to do it all myself. I can run it, but I can't do it, or I might not have the expertise. Who do you turn to? Who are you going to for that expertise?
This is a great question, man, and I'm glad that you asked it because it gives me the ability to like kind of address that elephant in the room, right? So I want everybody to know that essentially, whenever you're trying to take over the world, right? Genghis Khan didn't do it by himself, right? Napoleon didn't do it by himself. Neither did Alexander. The Roman army took 200, 300 years to kind of get all of their territory, right? But what did they do it with? They did it with an army of capable individuals that knew different things, right? So with that being said, what I know is business building. What I know is capital preservation and management. What I know is relationships and what those relationships can mean sometimes, right? So here's my point to that. I'm not going to be going out and finding these real estate development deals, right? I'm also not going to be swinging a hammer out at these houses. So what we will have is a subsidiary real estate company where essentially we provide the capital They go out, they build the houses, and it's very hands-off for us because it's mainly managed by the people that are doing the service, right? But we are doing it under our own company's umbrella. And the exact same thing will happen with the oil production. So you are absolutely right, man. If you try to do everything all at the same time, you will fail at every single one of them. I always say if you try to chase two rabbits at the same time, you will catch neither of them, right? So make sure that you're doing the thing that makes the most sense for you. For me, it is building the business and managing the relationships, right? So then you have an expert that goes out and does all the real estate stuff. Then you hire a firm that manages all and sets up all of your miners, right? And then a security firm that protects them every single day, right? Because I'm not going to be sitting out there with an AR-15. I've got other things to do. Secondarily, when it comes down to the oil, what we also want to do is use the already built infrastructure, all of the contracts that are already in place. Because remember, this has been printing for 10 to 12 years. It didn't get there by doing that. Just by chance, right? There were people that knew what they were doing in the geological reports. So that was one expert, right? Then there was the actual oil drilling company, another expert, right? Then you've got the mechanics and the people that are actually taking care of all of that, right? That's another expert. And then you've got the actual oil company that comes out and extracts the oil from the and put them on tankers, and then they go and take them to the refinery and do all of that, right? So literally none of this will I actually have to be doing. What we will be doing is managing them from an operational and like a C-suite level perspective, similar to kind of like Elon Musk, right? And I'm not comparing myself to Elon Musk because dude is an absolute animal, and I don't ever even want to be in the positions that he's in because he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders, right? And I've got a wife and a kid. Like I want to spend some time with my family, so I don't want to be Elon. But my point is he's got SpaceX, he's got Tesla, he's got all of these, he's got SolarX or whatever, I think it's called Solar City. He's got all of these different companies, X.com. He just manages them, right? And so that's what Wolfer is going to do. We are going to bring in those experts that are already in place. We're not going to reinvent the wheel on any of it and just kind of take it from there. So yeah, I mean, the oil
Right.
production is the one that I'm the most excited about, but it's also the hardest one to do in terms of not getting it up and running, but getting the contract in place, right? Because again, remember, like, it doesn't matter if you have all of this if you don't have the money to fund it and do it, right? Like I can get
Right.
all the contracts written up and I can have all the contacts in the world, but if I only raise $50, I'm not starting an oil company. If I only raise $20,000, we're not cryptocurrency mining, right? Same thing, if we raise 100 grand, we probably aren't going to buy a property, a real estate property. I mean, we could deploy it into like one real estate property. I get that, but you see what I'm saying? Like we can run a large scale institution off of it. So yeah.
So on that, and given that you're going to have this relationship with potentially family members who own the property, how do you manage that with this particular case? Because you're obviously excited about the oil. It could be incredibly lucrative, as could the flare gas. I did listen to your Bonks interview that you did, and he's always very excited about that particular topic because he does know a lot about it. And I've heard him go into quite a bit of detail about that particular topic and how exciting it is for the energy side of things, the green energy side of things, but also how lucrative it can be. Given that it can be that, there's going to be some element of pressure. Some might call it, and it's written down as a potential conflict of interest that you could have as things start to move down the line, and you're seeing that you've got all of these investors that you're now responsible for making sure that their money is well spent, well managed, that their expectations are going to be met. How might you manage a conflict of interest that could arise from, say, dealing with a family member who wants to push something through that you might not necessarily think you're quite ready to do yet? You don't think you're at that point. You're saying, I don't necessarily know if right now is the right time, but they want to get it through because they know that there's potential money there. How will that dynamic work?
Yeah, to me, see that none of that matters to me. So what makes the most sense is what makes the most sense. So people can try and gaslight me, and people have tried to gaslight me a million times, right? Even my own investors, right? They've gaslighted me 17 million times about bringing a regulated offering. It didn't stop me. It's not going to stop my trajectory. It doesn't matter who you are, cousin, brother, mother, son, child, whatever it is. Like no one's going to gaslight me into making a business decision, because all of that, you have to remove the emotion, you have to remove all of the like those heartstrings from all of that, which I do a very good job of doing. Really, that all comes down to company structure. So at the end of the day, if anybody knows anything about kind of the way that I set things up, I pretty much rule with an iron fist. So not like you can't have nothing happens in Wolfer Finance without me, right? Nothing happens in PreSend without my sign off, right? So even if somebody does want to try and push something through, I'm not going to let the company be set up in the manner that allows for that to happen. Like I'm not going to be outvoted, essentially, is what I'm saying. We'll be one of the operators. There will be 2 operators on the wells, and those operators have to, they have their particular voting rights. And the difference in between just being an owner operator and being a leasee owner operator means that you have more firepower to basically say, look, there's only 2 operators, but I have 2 votes. You have 1 because I'm the leasee or the leaseor, right? I own the mineral rights because we bought that. And secondarily, I am also the second operator on this stuff. Yeah, it's going to be, I wouldn't, the thing is I won't set my companies up like that because I've seen what happens when I let other people handle things or put money in other people's hands. And it's not worked out ever to this
Right.
point. So, I mean, you guys have kind of seen what happened with like, yield nodes and Project 79 and now even Hydro Whales and Pearl Core. And like, I'm not going to let anybody control anything, to be real.
No, I mean, I hear what you're saying and I appreciate what you're saying. And I'm going to just reference the people that are asking certain questions about being interested in the nodes and what's the actual investment opportunity. Of course, we're going to get to that. But I think part of making any kind of savvy investment is hearing some of these finer details that perhaps you won't necessarily hear asked all too often. And I hear what you're saying
Bingo.
by
Yep.
not allowing people to run a company on your behalf. But with the most recent quite significant fall of a particular project, and you were sitting in the AMA, we also noticed that just someone at the top being on their own making sole decisions can also be just as damaging if they don't do it the right way. And if they haven't surrounded themselves with the right people that they can lean on for advice, that they can lean on for some form of information, and that can steer the ship if they might be making a decision that perhaps isn't going in the right direction. So you've got
Yeah,
Craig
definitely.
Emsley,
Yep.
the swimmer, and I'm very keen to find out about his swimming at some point. But you've got him that's working with you as well. What's your relationship like with Craig? How do you guys bounce off of one another? How does that decision making happen between you? And how good is he at perhaps jumping in sometimes and saying, okay, let's slow down here, let's push a bit more there, let's make this decision, or perhaps not that decision?
Yeah, I mean, Craig is, like you said, he's an Olympian. He's a swimmer. He's literally 15 feet from me here in Consensus right now. He's the CMO of PreSend. He's the CMO of Wolfer Finance. He's on the board of both companies. At PreSend, we actually have 3 other people that are on the board there: Greg Gressick, Sky Rudis, and then obviously the co-founder Lawrence Haliski. They're all on the board there as well. But as far as Wolfer is, it's myself and Craig, right? And obviously, so Craig is, he's been brought in for a reason, right? And it's because he's very successful in the things that he does. He's actually one of the only people in the entire world. I think it's like only a dozen or 15 people or something like that. That is I think it's like 8-figure or something like that. ClickFunnels award winner. He's got one of those. I mean, this dude, he's not going to sit here and mess around, and he wouldn't even get involved in this company if he didn't see the upside potential, just because he knows how much his time is worth. And, he wouldn't even be involved if that was the case. But as it pertains to this, yeah, the way that I structure everything is to kind of address like the elephant in the room, right? Like what happened over there at that other project that I guess we probably won't name, right? But everybody knows what we're talking about. So there's a pretty significant difference in between the way that they had things structured and the type of business that they were running, an unregulated hedge fund, essentially, rather than a blockchain infrastructure company that's similar to an on-chain real estate company. And also, let's be real. We have the best lawyers in the world. We have Troutman Pepper. We have Polsinelli. You can look both of those up in the You can look both of those up online and you'll see those are the people that filed our patents. Those are the people that did our corporate documents. They'll be the people that continue to do our corporate documents and all of our contracts. We have the top industry professionals, and we're not just flying by night and handing people a ledger and saying, hey, man, here's a contract that I got off of lawdepot.com and then just put some stuff in it, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, we run our ship a little bit. I won't even say a little bit. I run it a lot tighter. I'm not going to mess around. I'm not going to put myself in jeopardy for anyone ever. Not my family, nobody, not my investors, nobody. That's why I will never let somebody gaslight me into doing things. And if you kind of look at what happened over there, seemed like some gaslighting happened, and the management couldn't deal with the gaslighting, and so they made a hasty decision. But I think I've probably been gaslighted and ridiculed and crucified. I'd say about 90x what they ever have, and I still won't break. So,
Right.
and I think the worst is behind me in terms of the gaslighting and the crucifying, because now we're here, and I think everybody's like, man, the guy's legit. He's doing what he said he did. So, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the information sharing, like I said, go ahead and look at the acamona.com offerings/Wolfer section, because you are going to be able to see all of the information that is pertaining to the company that has been set up. If you scroll all the way down, there is a section where you can download and open a lot of PDFs that have all of the audits, the financials. You can see where money is coming in, where it's gone out, etc. So yeah, in terms of transparency, you are obviously clearly trying to do things the right way, and we will probably name that project tomorrow when we're having a bit more of a candid crypto after dark conversation. But it isn't important for now. What was important to me was just to hear how you might respond to not a comparison to them, but me throwing that into the mix and how they dealt with it and how perhaps you might deal with things. So if
Yeah,
you,
definitely.
Drew Wolfer, were looking at a website that had an SEC offering and you were thinking about what kind of bonus or percentage increase on your money you might be able to get, or what you might
Mhm.
be able to get back, what kind of thing would you be looking for from that kind of offering?
Man, I love this question, and I appreciate you for asking it. Good, yeah, good on you, man. That was very creative. I appreciate that. So I would look at the very top graphic. I would say, okay, probably the most important things are going to be right there in the first 1 to 2 scrolls of the page, right? If a company is smart about their marketing, I would say, okay, I want to see the very first 2 portions of the page, and hopefully, if they're smart about their marketing, they would have graphics that would explain that to people in a fun and not so dull way, right? So I would look at the very top graphic that kind of tells me what I'm investing in, right? Like, what does that afford me? Does that afford me equity interest in the company? Does it afford me shares in the company? What are those shares? Do those shares get economic rights like dividends, right? Is that something that is built into this mechanism? What does their tokenomics, or in the case of a non-crypto company, what's their business and revenue model look like? Where does the revenue come from? Where does the revenue go when it comes in? Where does that net income go? Do they just pay it all out and pay it all out in salaries, or do they go out and buy more assets that generate them more income for, in order to best facilitate better returns in the future or potential returns in the future for their investors? So yeah, I would look at those things, and I would also see, hey, are they doing any like incentives? Is there any incentive for me to come in early on this? Is there any incentive for me to buy more on this? Is there any incentive for me to hit a certain benchmark or goal in this investment amount? And then I would kind of weigh the pros and cons of that and say, okay, well, if I hit all of these goals, what kind of a percentage bonus am I actually getting as opposed to the money that I put in? And what are the mechanisms behind that? So that's kind of what I would be looking at, among all the other things that are on the page, of course, because I would want to do my due diligence, and I would encourage everybody to do that as well.
Right. I mean, yeah, I'd certainly be looking at things like a 50% max profit share as a tagline,
Hmm.
dividends, of course, and a percentage of a token discount. I'd also maybe look at the fact that it's as small as a $50 investment. That's also an opportunity that's being afforded to people. So this is kind of access to what you guys want as a master plan, including what you already have. As we've already discussed, these savvy investments in these nodes that have now kind of skyrocketed in value. It's access to that. People are going to want to know, what does it mean for them, though? What at base level does it mean if I am investing in this company, if we go through this process with you and we want to jump on board, how do I earn my money? When am I going to start, if at all, getting dividends? When do these payouts aim to begin? When are the potential payouts going to happen? And what kind of payouts would I perhaps expect to see?
Yeah, absolutely. So the fundamental answer to that question is what this affords you is a digital security token, which is one of the first ever issued in the entire world, which is pretty cool. And it is the next, I guess, generation of physical shares in a company. So you are actually an owner in that company. You are actually a shareholder in that company, just like you would be on any other private or public corporation in the United States, right? And this is a private corporation. Now, what that digital security token does afford you, which I can say this, is economic rights. There are no voting rights to that token for, shareholders, because, kind of like alluding to what you were saying earlier, if you're going to let somebody in for $50, are you going to necessarily let them kind of like dictate where the company goes and things of that sort? Probably not. Most large companies and corporations in the United States, at least, won't do that. So a lot of these tokens are, very similar to every other corporation in the United States. And just so everybody knows, it is a corporation and it is an investment contract in between you and that company. It's not some phantom guy saying, hey, I think that I'm going to do this and blah, blah, blah. It's a person and a company saying, this is our corporate setup. Here's our documents. Here is the contract in between you and us that tells you everything that you need to know about this investment. And if you choose to do that, then you will actually have a physical investment contract that I have signed and that you have signed at the end of it that basically says, here you go. Right. And so that is, I think, one of the key differentiating factors to this. And then secondarily, assuming that company is already profitable, those dividends should be flowing like every other company, right? Usually on a quarterly basis, right? Like every other corporation in the United States. And it's really hard to kind of gauge what types of payouts people can expect, just because and I also can't actually touch on that because it's illegal for me to, well, it's not illegal, it's illegal for you to guarantee returns to people or guarantee a certain rate of return. What it's not illegal for me to say is that if you go onto the Wolfer Finance website and you look at the Excel spreadsheet that we have that anyone can download, publicly available since day one, that tracks every single thing that we have ever done, every single dollar that we have ever made, and you kind of do some basic mathematical calculations. From that, you can kind of understand what these validators that we do have can do, and then also what a potential subsidiary company in the future could also do if you start kind of basing that based back upon PreSend, or you start basing that on, oil production stats, cryptocurrency mining stats, typical real estate stats, and you can kind of infer where that's going. But I can't actually say anything about that because those aren't technical parts of our business model yet. So it would be purely hypothetical.
Sure. And again, go ahead, take a look at the website. You'll find all of the details there, and maybe have a re-listen to this, and certainly go and have a listen to some of the other AMAs that have been done, because you're going to be able to read between the lines and hear what Drew is trying to say, but can't say. I've got to say that when I was doing the rounds in terms of asking what people thought about you, the who's who and the people whose opinions I really value were highly spoken of you. They really spoke of you very highly, and they spoke of what you're trying to do here very highly. And the fact that you are willing to answer any question. And I had already prefaced this conversation with just a quick private message to you to say, just to let you know, I don't know how we were pitched to you, but I'm gonna press on certain things, and you were very open and said, ask whatever you want. I don't care.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
go ahead, you ask anything. So before we get on to the last portion of this, which is of course the other elephant in the room and another conversation that we're going to be having next week, which is PreSend, which you're also very excited about and really helps underpin a lot of what you're doing here. People aren't going to have voting rights. How much of a say, however, or not a say, how much of an influence is your community going to have? Given that you're coming from a community-backed environment, given that you've made a name within the YouTube sphere, that really is kind of ingrained within DeFi now. And a lot of people within this space want to be able to have a say. I do notice from the paperwork that, of course, it naturally says that you're going to have sole discretion over a lot of the decisions, and that will include where the money perhaps goes is invested, even down to how much people will get in wages. are people going to be able to jump into your community, perhaps disagree with some of the decisions, perhaps want to have a conversation about how much is spent, and how much of that thought are you going to kind of take on board and allow to guide some of the decision making that you make when it comes in particular to the finances?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a fair question and it's a great question. So I'll just be incredibly frank about it, right? So I have proven over a 2-year track record that I tend to make usually the correct decision. Now, have we made mistakes? 100% absolutely. Has everyone made mistakes? Yes, right? I am not infallible. I am a human being. I've made mistakes. One thing I will say is the main mistakes that we have made is entrusting other people to do things that we have no control over. So a couple of our biggest mistakes that we've made were things that we basically left out of our control. So I would like to keep, and I'm going to keep everything under my sphere of control. Now, I will say this with a grain of salt, and I will caveat this, right? Obviously, I love my community. I love every single person that's been here from day one. They are the ones that made this happen. They chose me. I didn't choose them. They chose me, which makes it even more love, in my opinion, right? That's why I have as much love as I do for them. Now, I will share in that love with anyone else that comes in. What I will say is I will take the community into account as I have before, right? Sometimes that works out, sometimes that doesn't. And so my caveat to that is that a lot of times with these communities, you don't necessarily know people, okay? And so, and I say this is purely an example. Say there
Mhm.
is a competent individual, right? That's like, hey, dude, I don't think that we should be going into real estate, like blah, 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 right? I think that you should be doing this certain type of real estate. Say that they're a real estate person and they have a competency in this area. The one thing that I can say is, first off, I'm not going to know that when you're just anonymously posting in a Discord. There's that. Let's address that first. Secondarily, let's say somebody proves that to me, okay? One other thing that I'm not going to know, your circumstances. How do I know that you don't have way too much and you're over leveraged in this, you're super worried and you're behind on your mortgage payment, right? And you're not in the right frame of mind to be giving real advice to somebody in a capacity that matters, right? Or how do I know that you even have a capacity to even advise on something like that? Say, for example, you're trying to tell me, hey, we should only take the oil production if X happens, right? But you work at Starbucks. How probable is it that your opinion is actually valid, right? So what I'll do is I will probably tend to deviate away from doing that and paying attention to my industry leaders and experts that are in my network. And I would hope, this is my hope, this isn't a guarantee, that the people that are here with me, they're here because they believe in me, because they believe that I'm going to do what I feel is best, as I always have, and that I will always go to war for them and fight for them. And secondarily, I will always kind of keep that in mind whenever I'm building the relationships, and I'm not going to take a chance with a decision before talking to what I would call a key opinion leader in said market that I know is tried and true and trusted, right? That we have brought in. And so hopefully people do trust that network, and if they do, at the very least, trust in me through osmosis, should probably trust in my ability to judge people's character and also their knowledge in a particular market, right?
Right. I think what's very interesting about a lot of that response is that you are not saying that you won't have people whose opinions and thoughts and feedback you're going to listen to. There are absolutely people whose thoughts and opinions you plan to listen to, but those have to be people that are in the right position to give you informed thoughts rather than just a random person on the internet sitting behind a Mad Hatter avatar, for example.
You
And I
got
think
it.
that's an
Yeah.
absolutely valid point, and it's a perfectly reasonable thing to say. It does mean, of course, that the community need to trust that you're going to drive this in the right direction, and the only way in which you can gain their trust is by doing things the right way and improving what you say you're going to do. With how you move forward with the company. So certainly, you're already applying a lot of that pressure on your own shoulders. And time will tell if perhaps you're able to burden that pressure. You're saying you absolutely can. and I think people are looking forward to seeing where you take this. You know, one thing that has to be said is you didn't raise a small amount of money the last time you did this, and you have transitioned this into something that is, you know, able to go through official channels, is completely doxed. It's compliant with SEC rules, which I think a lot of people now are going to start to appreciate, especially in light of recent activities from certain partners and people that play within this DeFi realm. And of course, I already see comments in people saying, you know, I'm here because I like what you're offering. I think what you've got and what you have on offer, in particular the nodes in this particular case with this individual, that's what they're here for. So hopefully what you've said now has just underpinned a lot of what they already want to hear, and they're now thinking about whether or not this is for them. So we
Yeah,
get to the last
absolutely.
portion of this, which is, of course, the proprietary software that you have been creating, that you've been doing a lot of work to get off the ground. It's cost you money. You know, so you've already said, I've heard you in another AMA said, you know, you've taken a loss so far on this, but you always light up when you're talking about it and get very excited about talking about PreSend. Give us a bit of
Yeah.
a light overview on what PreSend is, because we're going to be talking about it next week, and why that is so exciting to anybody that's looking to also get into Wolf of Finance.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you mind if before I answer that question, I go off on one little tangent just to
Please
kind
do.
of
It's your floor.
bolster Wolfer? All right.
Of
So,
course.
what I want people to understand is that we have a very proven and tried and true model, right? It doesn't matter whether I have $500,000 or $500 million. I can deploy that into solely master and validator nodes. That I can assure you. We can scale this thing until the cows come home. It's not a problem. So I say that to tell people our core competency and our core business model is always the same. We are just trying to diversify into other sectors so that we can hedge our bets, right? There's always bull markets and then there's bear markets. There's housing market ups, there's housing market downturns. Oil goes up in price. Oil goes down in price, right? Miners become very efficient, then they become inefficient. But by basketing up these assets and being able to hedge different markets, that is forward thinking. I don't think till next year. I think 10 years from now, because my goal with this company, as should be your goal in your investment portfolio, again, not financial advice, I'm not telling people what to do or how to think, but my goal is so that my kid can take this over, right? My goal is that this thing stays around forever, right? That's why we've set it up in the way that we are. Now, one thing that I think can put people's mind at ease is say that we don't do the oil, right? Say that that doesn't come through for whatever reason, right? Say that we decide, no, we're not doing real estate. The market's all crazy. Interest rates are high. We don't want to take advantage of it, right? Say that cryptocurrency mining, we don't get the electricity cost that we need. No problem, because guess what we can still do? Go buy a Cosmos validator that prints anywhere from 18 to 22% for about $700,000, $800,000. We can go get a Solana validator. We can get more Ethereum validators, put more in Avalanche, Flux, FTM, all of these different validators. The core business model still stays the same. And say that let's just say that we do get the oil contract, right? But it takes a while for those contracts and negotiations to come through. Well, guess what we can do the entire way? Because you don't want your money to just sit there. You can put it right into the master and validator nodes that we already have. We can put more into Avalanche. We could spin up a Solana node, things of that sort, and earn income and potentially price appreciation. Obviously, prices can also go down, so just know that there's that risk as well. And we can master and validator node until we get into those contracts. So it's not all about the oil or the real estate or the mining. What we have is a proven model that works. And we know that, and we can double, triple, quadruple, 10 down on that, right? So yeah, even if any of that stuff doesn't come to fruition, Wolfer is still here and it is still going to do what it does, right? So I just wanted to kind of address that to put people's
Yeah,
mind at
thank you.
ease. Yeah.
And also, let me throw in a question before you talk about PreSend, and before we kind of start to wind this down, because I know you're at consensus and you're going to want to get off and enjoy much of what they have to offer there. An interesting question has come in, but I'm going to kind of ask it in a slightly different way. You've drawn connections and you've created an analogy of the nodes, and as you know, property is an on-chain real estate company.
Yep.
Has drawing those analogies and thinking about it in that way given you any other ideas that you're wanting or thinking about exploring in the future that perhaps you might not want to discuss fully now, but has it created or sparked a bit of an idea in your mind where you thought, oh, this might be a really interesting angle to take in order to combine blockchain chain technology with real world utility? And I'm going to maybe park this now, but really excited to kind of hit my community, hit my investors and my company with this idea at some point in the future.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways that we can do that, and it absolutely has, because at the end of the day, it's a blessing and a curse, but my mind's always going. And there's two different ways. Okay, you could put it into real world assets, right? And you can get even furthermore. You could start sorry, not real estate. We have already talked about that. Like real world assets, like retail chains. Like, I mean, you could franchise McDonald's if you really wanted to. I'm not saying we're doing that, but I'm saying the possibilities are endless for a management company, a conglomerate like ours. You could also, if you prove yourself to be trusted in the market, we could also host other people's validator nodes. Like, okay, BlackRock, you want to come in and do the validators? I'm not saying that we'll ever have the market share to do this, because there's other node providers out there that'll do that for people and do it for institutions. But my point is that we do know how to do that. We do have the infrastructure in place, and we've proven over 2 years that we can do it. So there are like service-based business models that could add to that revenue as well. And then if you look at the skill set that I have, just the most random skill set that you could ever think about fathomably acquiring in life, I've got it. Because now I know, how do you market regulated offerings? How do you get everything compliant? Like, how do you classify your company? How do you set up a complex corporate structure with Delaware corporations? What needs to be onshored and offshored? Nothing of ours is offshored, by the way. But it's just like an example. How do you do all of these things? Why do I have all of the best lawyers in the world? How do you account for accounting? What are the taxes? Can I could consult on lots and lots of different things. So, I mean, there's a lot of service-based business models that could come with this as well. But those are things that, yeah, they're way off in the back burner. I'm not even putting those, because at the end of the day, what those models do, they basically pimp my time. And I hate to say it like that, but they do. They pimp my time for the gain of everyone else, right?
Right.
Whereas all of
But
this other stuff, it's easier to scale because you can kind of use other people's time for the benefit of everyone. And then I just kind of like manage all of those people, because think about it, if I'm advising 3 different companies on doing something, right? Like, how much time do I really have left to manage all of this stuff, right? But if I have 4 different companies like advising me on how and managing the things that I need to manage them on, then I have exponentially more time to then scale it into different aspects and further diversify or double down on the things that we're doing. So yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, but of course, it is something that you can always rely on and fall back on if you ever need to. So it's one thing that I think people
Definitely.
can take strength from, is that there are many strings to your bow. And if something doesn't necessarily work, then you can utilize your time to start doing part of that for the business. And that will help the business not only grow or continue, but it also gets eyes on, right? So it's something that you're always going to be able to fall back on and see. There's still a lot of questions coming in, which is actually great. I'm not going to be able to get through them all, but it's great that this conversation is forcing some more questions from people, because hopefully you guys are going
Yeah.
to jump into the Discord, you're going to take a look at the site, do a bit of research, and then kind of find out a bit more and see if you can kind of probe for those answers that you want. Before we let you
Yeah,
go,
and if
Luke, I
anybody
know
knows anything about me, they know I'm going to jump into the Discord. I'm going to run through those questions like a mad rabbit. So
right.
just keep asking them, guys, because I promise I'll come in there and answer them.
Before I let you go and enjoy consensus, hit me with that high energy PreSend, high level overview, and get people a little bit excited about the conversation they can expect next week.
Okay, so PreSend is the first official subsidiary company of Wolfer Finance, and it is a monstrosity. It is a monstrosity of potential. That's all I can say. I won't hype it any further than that, but what I will say is this is my opinion, okay? My opinion is that we have created and invented a technology that we have dually patented. It's pending patents, right? These patents are filed. They are not issued yet, okay? It's very hard to get patents issued. It's very friggin' expensive to get patents issued. But one thing I can say, we have 2 pending patents on our proprietary cross-blockchain technology security process that we can license out to any and every single entity in the entire cryptocurrency ecosystem. That means centralized exchanges. That means decentralized exchanges. That means wallets. That means blockchains. That means every platform ever can utilize this, because every single one of them, anybody that has people coming in, transacting into or out of their platform, we can protect those transactions. And let's be real, we need to, because you can literally lose your Bitcoin on Bitcoin chain. That's absolutely ridiculous. I hate the fact that you can do that, because in traditional financial markets, you cannot do that. You can't send your wire to a wire that a bank account that doesn't exist, and then it just gets lost in transit, never to be recovered.
Right.
It literally just gets reverted back to you. Why is that not in blockchain? Well, it's because Satoshi Nakamoto could not have even fathomed how revolutionary this technology was going to be, and how many people in the world were going to try to copy his success and add these different blockchains, right? So there was no need for all of this interoperability, compatibility, reverting mechanism BS. And let's be real, his whole paper was on decentralization. So if there is a reverting mechanism, guess what that is? Centralized now. So that would literally go against his entire ethos, everything that he stood for. So what can we do? We can invent a solution that stops that from happening. We can't go back in time and change it, but what we can do is be in the future, and we can implement something that every single platform, everybody can utilize, that will stop that from happening, or at the very least prevent it from happening, right? So that's what PreSend is. We literally stop you from sending USDC on the wrong blockchain into Coinbase and losing your money. We stop you from sending BUSD to Kraken and losing your money. We stop you from sending Bitcoin on SegWit to a main legacy wallet and losing all of your Bitcoin. Let's be real. Don't lose your digital gold, right? That's what we stop from happening. And that's the whole reason we're at Consensus right now, talking to all of these VCs, telling them, hey, PreSend is here. You might want to buy this later on, but we're just alerting you that it is here now. We're talking to all these centralized exchanges, all of these wallets. I'm already in talks with some of them. I'm already under NDA with a massive company that you've heard of. You've probably used them. You might use them in your daily life actually right now. And man, it's time to go out and license this bad boy to the biggest players in the game and make some friggin' money, because we're disrupting $1 trillion industry and we could make billions off of it. I'm not saying we're going to make billions off of it. I'm saying this could be one of those companies like comes in and really, really changes everything for the better, is my point. Now, there's no guarantee of that, and I won't sit here and hype it any more than I already have, because I feel like I've already hyped it way too much by saying that, and I kind of regret saying it now, but that is how I
Absolutely
see
not.
PreSend.
It's passionate, and I think we're going to wind it down there, because that was a perfect ending. I think that leaves enough for people to want to go and take a look at what you guys are doing, take a look at PreSend. You and I have another conversation that we're going to have tomorrow, which is a Crypto After Dark. It's going to be a little bit more candid. It's going to be about you. It's going to be sharing a glass of whiskey, talking a bit of nonsense about some of those bad actors that we were referencing earlier, and just diving into what makes Drew Wolfer tick. So I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation to follow on from this, to follow on from that last little bit of hype about PreSend, and to be a pre-conversation to the chat about PreSend next week, which is obviously something that you're incredibly excited about, that you're pushing to the right people, and by the sounds of it, you can't say anything, but are getting into bed with some of the right companies, and especially some of those big companies that you're saying we may be using on a daily basis. So I would recommend everyone come and listen to that tomorrow, and certainly get their hit that interested button, get their interest in for the conversation next week. Drew, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I look forward to doing this again tomorrow. You go and enjoy Consensus. We will speak again.
Absolutely. All right. Sounds good. Thank you for everybody showing up as well. I appreciate the community.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for listening, and we'll speak again soon. Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.